Welcome to Raya Shikshan Sanstha's online learning program, Standard 6th. Hello students, today we'll be doing lesson 3.6, The Merchant of Venice, Part 1. That is a very interesting chapter. Actually, it's not a chapter, it's an entire book written by William Shakespeare, a well-known author. You must have heard his name, and he has written many more novels. So let's go through the story The Merchant of Venice. Antonio was a merchant who lived in Venice, a prosperous city in Italy. In those days, that is about 500 years ago, sea voyages were dangerous, and yet some adventurous merchants travel across the seas. Some others spent a lot of money in sending ships to faraway countries. These ships brought back spices and other treasure from India and other countries. The merchants sold these things in Europe. They made a lot of profit in this business. So it's a story about a merchant who lived in Venice. His name was Antonio, and Venice was a prosperous city of that time in Italy. Voyages means sea traveling. So the merchant at that time used to do business. They used to send merchandise and ships, and in return they got spices and other useful things, and they earned a lot of money. At the time when the story begins, Antonio was waiting for his ship to return with merchandise. He had put almost all his money in the ships. Antonio was a kind man. He had many friends, but his best friend was Bassanio. Bassanio was a young and handsome nobleman, but unfortunately he had no money. So Antonio was a kind man, and when story begins, Antonio was waiting for his ships, and he's quite worried because sea voyages were at that time sea voyages were not safe, very safe at that time. So he was so worried about his ships that they would come or not, and he was eagerly waiting for it. Bassanio wanted to marry Portia. Portia was beautiful and intelligent. She was the only daughter of a very wealthy man. Her father had died, leaving her a large estate. So Bassanio was a best friend of Antonio, who was poor and he had no money, and he wanted to marry Portia, who was daughter of a rich man, a very rich man in Venice, who had already died, and but his father, means Portia's father, left a will and a large estate. In his will, Portia's father had written how Portia's husband should be selected. He had set a test for her suitors. They had to choose between three caskets, one of gold, one of silver, and one of lead. So, in his will, he had written how his daughter would be choosing her suitors, and the things was that the suitor had to be choose among one of the caskets, the gold, silver, and lead caskets, and among them one of the casket was right, and the one who chooses the right casket first will be the winner. Each casket had something written on it. On the gold casket, it was written, "Whoever chooses me shall gain what many men desire." On the silver casket, "Whoever chooses me shall get as much as he deserves." On the casket of lead, "Whoever chooses me must give and hazard all he has." So the gold casket has different note. So most of the people got confused by things all the men desire Portia. One of the Portia's suitor was the Prince of Morocco. He chose the gold casket. But when he opened the casket, the message inside said that it was not the right casket. All that glitters is not gold. So it was just a tricky thing to test the intention of suitors. Another suitor, the Prince of Aragon, choose the silver casket, but that too was not the right casket. Bassanio wanted to try his luck with the casket. To do that, he had to travel to Belmont, where Portia lived on her estate. He needed money for that. When Antonio came to know that he wanted to help, he told Bassanio to borrow money in his name, means in Antonio's name. They went to Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, and asked him for the money. So Bassanio wanted to try his luck, but as I told you that he had to travel to Belmont, but he had no money. So Antonio told him to borrow money in his name, and they went to Shylock. Shylock had a lot of money, but he was not at all generous. Money was all that he cared for. He did not like Antonio because Antonio sometimes lent people money without charging any interest for it. So Shylock decided to take advantage of this situation. He gave them the money on a strange condition. If Antonio failed to return the money within 3 months, Shylock would cut off a pound of Antonio's flesh. Antonio agreed to this and borrowed the money for Bassanio. So Shylock was also rich as Antonio, but he was not at all generous like Antonio, and he did not like Antonio because Antonio's generosity affect his business. So Shylock decided to take advantage of his situation. Bassanio went to Belmont. When he saw the casket, he chose the lead one. That was the right casket, and Bassanio won Portia's hand by choosing it. Portia too was glad to marry Bassanio, and they both were very happy.